70 miles of mountains on fire that we could see from where we were. And that was probably one of the most awesome sights I'd ever seen.
My name is Sue Fong Henry.
I'm Amanda Rogers.
My name is Martin Rodriguez.
My name is Jade Riley.
My name is Dawn Riley.
My name is Shira Zaid.
My name is Lisa Zaid.
My name is Kak Young.
My name is Trevor Quirk.
My name's Rebecca.
My name is Eric Rosenberg.
That's Nadia.
This is Mickey.
My wife.
My husband.
I've lived here in this neighborhood since 1994.
I live on Sulphur Mountain Road in Upper Ojai. I have a wife and 3 kids.
I like the rural lifestyle, beautiful scenery, and we've been blessed to be able to live here.
My brother and I were raised here, and then now my family and I have lived here for the last 10 years.
And my daughter and I and Mom and Dad, we were living here together. And so in this house is about 47 years worth of stuff.
I'm 33 years old, and I've lived in Ventura for about 2 years. I have a wonderful wife and 2 daughters, but at the start of the fire, I only had 1 daughter.
I moved out here to California in 1978. I surfed professionally, and I'd come out for a competition in '76, and I fell in love with the hillsides. Just the surf was amazing, the hiking the hillsides, riding your bike through downtown Ventura back then too was just unbelievable, and I knew that I had found a home. Went back to Florida and told my family that as soon as I graduated from high school that I was out of there and I was coming out to California, and I did. Drove across country, loaded my stuff, my surfboards on the top of my car, and drove to California and didn't look back.
I happened to be at the house the night of the fire. Some friends and I from CrossFit were making plans to play tennis, and we were kind of all in like a little message thread. One of my friends mentioned like, hey, have you guys seen the fire yet? So I was like laughing about it. I'm like, this is hilarious. Like, my grandparents are all Holocaust survivors. Like, nothing's gonna happen to us or our family home. Like, we're good. Like, we've been through a lot in the family.
I got some texts from some people that were interested in moving into the area, and they were saying that your tract is on fire and people are evacuating. And so I didn't really believe it because fires have been close to the area before.
There were very bad winds that night. There were Santa Ana winds. I knew that it was going to be a problem.
I was actually in Maui when the fire started.
So everybody left, got their showers really quick, and as my son was coming up, I happened to step outside and I noticed a plume of smoke over the hillside there, and he said, oh gosh, you know, Mom, I was just on Facebook, there's a big fire, it's in Santa Paula, down by Steckel Park, and it looks really, really bad.
And I just remember like looking outside and like the sky was orange, and it was like cold and the sky was orange, and I was just like, this is so strange, but it was also sort of magical because when else is the sky going to be orange?
Out of the mountain, it's just glowing red. Oh, that's fire. Wow, check that out. And then we went away for a little bit. It was like way over there, and then we came back and it's way over there. And I was like, what? Like, how did it move so fast? I'd never seen a fire move that fast before.
So we put the kids to bed around 9 o'clock and told them everything's gonna be fine. And then my husband and I started packing those essential things. We really thought we were coming back, so we shared a bag, which we normally don't do. And I remember being a little mad because he wanted to share a bag, but I thought, oh, I don't have time to argue.
Just before bed, we had saw on our phones a little report that there was a fire in Santa Paula about 10 miles or so away, but nothing we were worried about at that point.
My friend Charlie Cook had a special on television that he just finished, and I was watching it, and the power went out and spectrum went out, and so it was very frustrating. Finally, about 10:15, I decided to just go to bed.
At about 12:30 in the morning, our neighbor came from across the street and woke us up by pounding on our front door.
What I knew is that somebody really wanted to tell me to get out, and I couldn't believe it. I thought at first, well, this is nuts. What's going on? The fire's in Santa Paula. It's miles away. What's going on?
And I ran over to the front door to try to stop the sound. I didn't want it to wake my little girl. When it was my neighbor, he said, have you heard about the fire? This might be the one we have to pack up and evacuate.
I started to get some documents together, and at the time, I had a couple of things happening that were a little difficult. I had some foot surgery. I had a leg brace that I was wearing, and so I was limping out there with my files. I saw the orange glow in the sky. They had 100 firefighters on it. And I'm looking at the orange glow thinking they need 1,000. I go, this is really serious.
My 93-year-old neighbor called me and said, there's a fire.
We all clustered around this one small window in our upstairs hallway, looking into Arroyo Verde Park and, seeing this wall of flames coming in.
I woke up Marlene and I said, we have to go. And I came out to the patio and I saw flames probably 40 feet high coming over the back of the house behind us.
I walked out to my driveway and I looked up the hill here, and the whole hillside was ablaze. And there were flames as far as I could see, both directions. It was a giant cloud of smoke. We saw houses light on fire standing right here on the corner about a block or so away. It was very close to home, but we at this point hadn't been told we had to evacuate yet.
So about that time, my wife says, probably ought to get up, it's getting close. So I got up and I said, holy shit. Basically, I got a ladder and went to the first floor, and then the ladder took up the second floor and got the water hose out, started wetting everything down. The vents is where things catch on fire. Your house burns from the top down, inside out.
I basically just told my stepmom and my little sister to leave the house, and they started kind of packing little belongings. We had 2 dogs, so we got the pets together.
And it was about 4:30 in the morning. Police came in and said there's a voluntary evacuation for our neighborhood.
My dad and I basically had planned to sort of hold down the fort at the house and to stay as long as we could.
When we were trying to wake the tenants up, my boyfriend being so polite that he is, his good manners, he's knocking and knocking and knocking on the one door and knocking. He said, you gotta wake her up. And I finally screamed at him, just break the window. And he was like, I don't wanna scare her. And I'm screaming at him, I think she's already gonna be pretty scared. And at that moment, she came out the door and it was kind of like, oh my God, the world is on fire.
We decided it was go time. About a minute later, the police started driving down this street, every street in the neighborhood, with their lights and sirens on, saying in the megaphones that there's a mandatory evacuation. It's time to go now.
People were really hysterical on the street. People were crying and getting in their cars, and it was very chaotic. And my dad and I were just kind of going up to all of the neighbors, calming them down, telling them that everything was gonna be okay.
It looked like at the beginning of one of those movies where everyone's driving out of their perfect neighborhoods to go to work in the morning, but it wasn't a perfect neighborhood. There was smoke and fire and sirens and blue flashing lights. So it really felt more like a war zone than my safe and comfortable neighborhood.
I put the first file into my car and I thought, well, I'm not gonna make it. So I gotta get somebody, but I couldn't get my neighbors because they were all packing themselves. So I went down, I have an ex-husband who lives down over by the mall. I went down to him and he's with another significant other at this point, right? But I didn't have anyone else to go to. So I went down to him and I knocked on the door and I just said, emergency, emergency. He opened the door and he just said, holy crap. He goes, what do you need? And we could see the fire coming over the hill. So he ran up here and we got my files, my jewelry, and some pictures. We got our pictures out.
And I called Mickey right away and I'm like, what is going on? I'm like, what is happening? And he's like, yep, we're evacuating. Kind of went into this sort of, producer mode. What needs to happen right now? Like, how can I help you?
And I knew that this was particularly dangerous because of the speed in which it was moving. And being alone with the 2 kids and a dog and a cat. And then we also have, 15 years of hard drives that have valuable images stored from our archives and then our clients that we've worked with, and some of them don't have backups, and so we didn't have time to get really anything because we live on top of the mountain, and the driveway is a 2-minute drive, and it's a single lane road, and it's the only way out, and where the fire was coming was threatening that exit, and I knew that once that caught on fire, and it's just nothing but forest, that we could be stuck up here. All of our community here decided that they were going to sacrifice all of their own belongings, and let's just get the drives out of here. We weren't ready for this, We didn't know where to put the drives. We had no containers, and they were probably 1,000 pounds in total. And so we were, putting them in boxes. The boxes were breaking, and drives were dropping, and we have no lights, and so we have cell phones, flashlights, and it was just mayhem trying to get the drives out.
So I told my wife to get our kids ready. I told her not to tell the kids what was going on because I didn't want my kids to panic. We fed our kids, actually got them some showers. I called my parents and I said that we're gonna send the kids down there and they need to stay the night. And right as they are loading into the car, a search and rescue vehicle was at my driveway, and I could hear them honking and screaming at the top of their lungs. You need to evacuate, get out, things like that. It caused some panic in my car, to say the least.
As you're heading out the door, as you'll hear, I think if the lights would have been on, it would have been a little easier, but in pitch black, the panic of everything going on, and you're trying to get the dogs out, and you're trying to get out the door with 2 dogs in a panic state, and everything's just on fire. When I was going out the door, I looked, and there were some photos on the credenza of my kids, and it's one of my favorite pictures of my daughter and my grandson, and a picture of my son, and I literally just went by and just swooped and grabbed and tucked him under my arm and just kept going.
I had a really cool motor that I'd built up from scratch for one of my motorcycles, and I started to grab it and take it, and I said, you know what, it's done. What else next? Then, it can keep on going. It's just like, what do you take? And I could see this neighbor's house was catching on fire, the front, and then I looked down the street, and it was catching on fire next door, it's just like I almost, just said, shit, I need to get out of here. So I came down, started my truck, and pulled my truck forward. I'd already had it loaded up. I got cash, my wife's jewelry, and guns.
I basically grabbed my laptop, my camera, clothing, and shoes. I grabbed a couple pairs of shoes, and I grabbed a book of poetry by Langston Hughes.
I grabbed my guitar, which had a lot of sentimental value to me. It was a guitar that belonged to my older sister who passed away a few years ago.
My grandmother, she had most of the animals, and then Prius was most of our stuff. I grabbed a backpack. I stuffed it with a pillow, a sleeping bag. I stuffed it with some of my toiletries, a toothbrush, and I also stuffed it. I had this little pillow my friend gave me from school.
What I remember from my training was to grab the things that you can't replace and would take time to replace, because the rest of it, it's just stuff.
As we were leaving, we got stuck in traffic, and our dogs were just shaking in the back of the car. They were so scared. And he's just sitting in the back seat, totally freaked out and just watching the cars go by.
All we had was Marlene's very small BMW convertible. So 5 cats in their cages, 2 dogs not in their cages, Marlene, myself, a couple of purses. We were in our nightgowns, and I put a jacket on, slippers, and out the door we went.
I sent my wife and my daughter off in the first car, and I went back. The last thing I grabbed was actually my Boy Scout uniform and that ketubah, because I knew those were 2 things I could never replace.
Before we left, we did stand in the driveway and we said one last prayer over the property and just said, whether it's here or not, that our faith is not in, these things that are here.
We immediately started going to make sure that our tenants were off the property. We were having trouble getting one of our tenants awake. She had just lived here only 2 days. We got her up, we got everybody out, the dogs are loaded, and it was coming over the hill so fast. We walked up to the edge of the driveway because we can see the ocean from there, and the fire was all the way down to the bottom of the hillside on the avenue. You could see the ring going around Ojai, and the biggest concern was if we don't get out of here now, the freeways could get shut down and we're gonna be stuck in the middle of this. So we started heading down, and I remember stopping on the way down the driveway, our little narrow driveway, and the fire's coming down, ashes blowing everywhere. And I stopped because I thought, maybe I can just back up the hill and get one thing. Maybe it's the pictures of my kids. Maybe it's the flag that was on my dad's coffin, you know, when he passed. Something. And something hit the roof of the truck. And I looked at kind of like, what was it? I thought it was a branch or something. And it was a bird. And the bird had fallen from the sky out of smoke inhalation.
The next thing we see is that line of fire trucks. They all started heading down Koenigstein and turned right towards Ojai. They were gone. Everybody was gone, and we're like, we haven't been notified of anything. I mean, we knew it was bad, and then we saw the flames come up and the smoke. And at that time, it was coming so fast, they barely got out. And there was nothing we could do. There was no way for us to get out. This is our only way in and out, and it was cut off. It would have been nice to have been informed of I guess, the severity of it. And it would have been nice to have some help with the firemen. They usually kind of tell us where to go and where to be. This time we didn't have that. It was my husband and myself. Getting our goggles out, getting our face masks out, and waiting for the embers to start coming.
We went down to the bottom of the street, and I made some calls, and we started going, and just our thought was to get the dogs safe and then come back. And when we got off the freeway on Ventura Avenue by Main Street, all chaos was happening. It was just pure chaos. People were running and screaming, carrying record players and pictures and their kids and trying to drag their dogs. And there was a line of cars going down the avenue, backed up. And I'm thinking, what happens if this neighborhood goes up? These people are gonna be stuck. And you've got all the horse trailers trying to get their animals in and fire trucks coming in and out. And I texted my boyfriend who was in the other car, and I said, don't go to the fairgrounds, go to Pierpont Inn parking lot. We'll catch our breath, we'll make a plan.
So I did something that really irritated my wife, and I told her that I was gonna follow her down the mountain, and I never left. And I stayed behind and started preparing my house for the fire. I prepared my house, and I'm sitting in my truck at the base of Sulphur Mountain Road, waiting for the fire to come, basically. As I'm sitting there in my truck, I see a woman and her daughter in the middle of 150. You're not supposed to be standing in the middle of 150, and I could tell something was wrong. And so I told the woman, I rolled down my window and I said, get in my bleeping truck. So I stuck them in my truck, and the woman was crying, and the daughter was like hysterical. I said, where's your car? She says, it's stuck in a ditch. And I looked at the girl, her name was Emma, and I said, where's your dad? She said, my dad is running in the field looking for our dogs. And I told him, I said, well, look, I'm not gonna leave up here because I gotta go up and defend my ranch. And so I drove my truck, and I started thinking about my 93-year-old neighbors because they're my friends and I like them a lot. I drove up there to the top of the ridge, and I get there, and Bill, he's outside with his wife, and they're putting on a tractor tire on their tractor. And the fire had hit the ridge at that point, and things were bad. The flames were starting to jump. The road, Sulphur Mountain Road, it was hot, it was very smoky, and it wasn't a very good situation. It wasn't a safe situation for these women that I have known for probably 5 minutes at that point. The lady was panicking. I thought to myself, I couldn't kill these women up here, right? I would feel very guilty. So I flew out of that driveway, went zipping down Sulphur Mountain Road. Thankfully, the trees hadn't fallen yet, but there was fire on both sides of the road. I I got down to the base of 150 and I stopped the car and I said, are you going to Ojai? Because the person said, yeah. And I told the women, I said, get in that person's car. Stuck them in the car. I went back up to my ranch. There was a man standing in the middle of the road holding a 5-gallon bucket. His water tank was melted. It was on fire. His house was on fire. And he was collecting the water and putting it on himself so he wasn't going to burn alive.
Our problem is that our big tank, which holds about 4,500 gallons, had sprung a leak. My parents had been here, living with us. We didn't want to disrupt their lives by having to trade out the water tank and repair it. So we waited until they moved, and then we used up all our water in the big tank and switched to a 1,000-gallon tank. Actually, it was 950 gallons. And we did that the day before the fire broke out.
So we came back and we came up and parked up the street, and everything was on fire, and we could see our house was just fully engulfed in flames. Then the concern was for our neighbors. And the next thing we know, it blew and caught the tree and the neighbor down below us. Their avocados tend to go up and they kind of blow up the way they explode. And that tree caught, and there was no help, there was no fire. It was neighbors putting them out with hoses with little amounts of water and buckets filled with water.
About that time, the other two guys, and some of the neighbors probably call us the knuckleheads, but it was Chuck and his buddy Sean and Keith, I think it was. And well, they came around the corner and seen me struggling, and hey, we're here. They might have been drinking too. And hey, we just went to work and put Luther's house on, that one was the one that was catching on fire because all this bush is right by the house. And so it just went from one house to the other, started pulling out bushes. And there was no water. There was only several hoses that had water. And so we found those out, and basically it was a free-for-all. Grabbed everybody's trash can. I don't know whose was whose. Grabbed everybody's water hose and had them plugged in. And we started filling up water, the trash cans with water, and then using a bucket. But Luther's was on the corners, one we thought we were gonna lose because the fence, first the yard was catching on fire, then the fence caught on fire, and then the bushes caught on fire. And then there was a fiberglass boat that had got blown in on top of those things. And, but there was nobody here yet. You gotta remember, it was deserted. And I'd see fire trucks go by and they couldn't stop. They have orders to go to the other place where it was really going off. Were we careful about anybody's fences or trash cans? No. About their bushes and landscaping? No. You know, they were catching on fire, so we just pulled the whole bush out. Simple as that. One of the guys down the street had the boat that went in, that blew into the wood chips. Well, once that fiberglass boat catches on fire, it's over, man. It was gonna catch the house on fire, and we knew it, and then that would have took the neighborhood. And like I say, if it wouldn't have been for my two neighbors coming around the corner and then my neighbor behind me, the neighborhood was gonna go up as I was up on the roof, and I could see all the little, because I was going back and forth, and I could see all the little spot fires.
And so it died down probably around 3 o'clock, and we're thinking, great, we can get through this. I mean, it'd come through, it was still burning up this canyon up here. And over here, we noticed that it wasn't so active. There was a couple of little things, but not much. And we're like, wow, this is awesome. It's not gonna come really close to us. And then around, I don't know, 3:20, 3:30, those winds came back with a vengeance. I mean, 80-mile-an-hour winds, easy. And that fire whipped up so fast, it caught this tree line down here. The embers came and just set this thing on fire again. It whipped back around because it was behind the hills over here, whipped back around, got our neighbor's house. Well, within 20 minutes, the house was fully engulfed. At one point during the fire, my husband told me, we saw the fencing down by the cottage where our son lives. It's going, it's going. He's like, leave it, let it burn. He goes, it's not worth our lives. I said, I'm gonna go check on the goats, honey. So I totally disobeyed him And I ran down and I saw that the fencing was on fire and the plants were on fire, but I also knew that my son had a big, giant 32-gallon trash can full of water down there with towels on it. And so I grabbed those towels and I grabbed a bucket and I started putting it out, but I couldn't get the fence down. And I'm kicking at it and I'm kicking at this fence and I don't have any tools to take it down. And all of a sudden I see a shadow running down the road. And I'm thinking, oh boy, am I gonna hear it? My husband's gonna be so mad at me because I'm down here and distracting him from keeping the house safe. He came down and in 2 kicks he had that fence down and he goes, darn it, I told you to stay up there. He goes, I knew you were gonna not listen to me. He goes, it wouldn't be any different than you ever do in our married life. I couldn't stand to let the cottage go because I know even though we have insurance, we can't really afford to rebuild it. And that's a huge concern, even with insurance.
We got up to Carpinteria about 5 a.m. We stayed at our in-laws for a couple hours, just watching the news, trying to find out anything we could about what was going on. And that was actually the point I started seeing some news reports saying there were homes burning on my street. And a friend took a picture of Channel 5 News from Los Angeles on his phone and sent me a picture of it showing that house right there on fire, 4 doors down from me and across the street. So at that point, that was when I had the real emotional impact of what was going on hit me the first time. That was when I realized I might lose my house out of this too.
We waited, we drove around. I went to the VMSC, the emergency pet place, and I said, can we rent a room here to put the cats in? Can we just have one of your rooms? And they said, no. And I said, well, we need to feed our cats. We need to let them go to the bathroom. We're in a tragedy. And they said, no, it's against company corporate policy. And I said, okay, that's well and good for when we're not in a disaster, but the place could be on fire. Can I rent it? Can I pay for it? What can I do? And they were sort of like, I felt in that moment like maybe I looked like a transient or a homeless person. I was in my nightgown and slippers, but there was no mercy. And I finally said, well, can I get some cat litter? How about some water? All right, well, it took them about 30 minutes to get me a bag of cat litter. And the guy said to me, well, CVS, you can go to CVS and get it. I said, everything is blacked out. The stores are closed. They were in their little womb. They had no idea of what was going on. And I said, step outside. Look at the city on fire.
Then my dad just kind of looked around, and he's totally not the kind of person to ever evacuate a situation at all. Like, he's very sort of hardcore about protecting, the home that he bought 40 years ago. And he's like, I think we just need to leave.
One of my nephews, Trevor, came over too, and we're just kind of standing there, and we just said, we're looking at the ranch, and just said, I think this is it. I think there's really no more we can do.
The scariest part of the fire was waiting for daylight to come back, waiting to see what had happened for everyone.
So my kids are at school, and both of them were actively involved. I was the only one here that night. They kept wanting to know what was happening with the house, okay? Even more so than me, because I was with the whole Buddhist thing. I always thought, well, my things are not important to me. Right? So when I thought my house was gone, it's like I was very stoic, everything's good. So they had a couple of friends come up. They're not even in town. They had a couple of friends come up early in the morning and to check out the house. So I actually got my first picture of the house from them early in the morning, and there was a firefighter there just watching the house. And that was the first time I saw the house still standing, and I cried. I cried because I didn't know how much my house meant to me until I saw it again. It's kind of like a friend, you have all your memories. And so it was like, well, all that, the Buddhist thing, you know, all that stuff about me not caring about my stuff, in reality, I did. You know, I did. And it's just memories are here, everything's here, you know?
We ended up going to our friend's house. When the fire got there and they had to evacuate, we went to Miramani to a friend's house. And then it got even closer, and we ended up going to Ventura to a friend's house. And they were housing 3 or 4 other families.
We came back to my grandmother's house where the family was, and at about 4 in the morning, so there were security cameras on my dad's house everywhere, and he started getting alerts that there were like heat advisories on the camera. Maybe a few minutes later that like windows and doors of the house were being breached. And so we have like the last footage that the security cameras showed of just like, you know, thousands of embers like raining like a firestorm into the backyard of the house.
And then he called me, you know, that night and he said, you know, it's gone. It's gone. And I kind of had prepared myself a little bit because I knew that that was a possibility, but it almost was a relief to just know. And then I was like, okay, all right, you're back safe in Santa Barbara. Kids are safe. And okay, like, it's gone.
I didn't know what was going to happen next, and all we knew was the fire was growing. And at 8 p.m., my wife went into labor. And that was when this fire story went extra crazy for us, because not only could we not go home, we had to figure out where we could go with the baby. So we called the doctor's office and we said, should we go to Santa Barbara, to Cottage Hospital, the opposite direction of the fire? Or should we come back to Ventura and go with the original plan? And I followed doctor's orders. He said, come back to Ventura.
P.S. Did we mention we're on the way to the hospital because I'm in labor?
This is the world record drive to the hospital. You know, doctor's orders, you do what the doctor says. So we drove to the hospital here, to CMH, Community Memorial Hospital. We parked and we went inside, and the whole hospital was filled with smoke, just like outside, which wasn't a huge surprise. So we went into the emergency room, and the doors were open in the lobby, which I don't know why they had them open, but everyone had masks on inside. We all had to wear smoke masks even in the hospital. Every hallway you could see smoke. It was not a typical hospital visit by any means, but we were lucky in that when we got up to the maternity floor, it was a little less smoky, and the labor and delivery rooms they'd kept sealed up. So it was that next morning with, you know, smoke out the windows, smoky corridors in the hospital. You could almost see the flame out the window from the hospital, that my little Mila was born. And she came into the world happy and healthy, and she's perfect.
So my favorite part of the fire was probably seeing my wife and kids after. Hold on.
We are closer because we survived a tragedy together, and we all are, you know, going through different stages of this at different times.
We became very, I think, community-oriented in that moment and at that time.
After the fire, I think it almost feels more like home. Not that it didn't before, just because of how we connect with so many other people.
I don't blame anybody for this. A lot of people are starting to point fingers at public works because of the failing water, aging water system we have here. Some people are trying to blame people for not clearing brush. Some people are blaming this, blaming that. It doesn't do anybody any good to blame anybody for this. It just happens. Disasters happen. And it's what you do afterwards that's important.
Ventura is a very unique place. Like, we're one of the few, I think, coastal communities that really has this strong community feel to it.
I've heard it from every media group that I've talked to that came in to cover it. Firefighters from all over the world. We've had dinner with some all during the process that was going on, and all of them said the same thing. I've never seen a community like this. People truly care. And the outpour that has happened, not just for myself, but through the Local Love Project, what I've seen there, the acts of kindness, over and over again, these heroes and angels that just keep popping up to help someone right at that moment when that person needs it.
There isn't a day that goes by where I'm sitting here and something magical happens in this parking lot. It's almost too coincidental. A lady lived in Canyon, I think. And she said, I heard about this and I really need tools. Do you have any power tools? And literally at that time, someone walks in with a carload of power tools. And it happens multiple times a day. It changes hands like that. It's so, so cool.
It was a moment of generosity that showed me what the community was doing for each other and to each other.
It's like a Hollywood movie, you know, one of those Hallmark Channel movies. These kids, a lot of them they were kids that grew up here. They flew home from wherever they were. I mean, they dropped everything, they stayed. They came in and they started a relief effort with some of the residents that already live up here. They've mobilized to get people who lost their houses back the tools that they need to clear their property. They've gone out on sifting parties. They've gotten clothes donated, housing, people who didn't even know each other. Even though you live here for 30 years, it's fairly well spread out. And they're just doing a wonderful job of making the community whole again.
This person's loving on me at a time when I really, really need it, and not asking for, you know, I didn't have to help or do anything. We were still in so much shock.
The whole process of receiving has been surprisingly difficult for me. But receiving donations from people was just like, I almost didn't want to know it was happening. Like, oh, you take care of it, baby, go get that and whatever. And I don't tell me, because I just felt weird. It was hard to consider that we were victims of anything, you know, that we were needy. And I would stop and I would say, yeah, but we lost everything. And we didn't have proper fire insurance. The truth is, yeah, we actually do need community support. We need help.
We got a basket from one of my ballet friends full of toiletries, like shampoo, we have shaving cream, shavers, you know, we have all that stuff because everyone's been donating it to us, and it helps them and it helps us.
It just so happened our church has a parsonage that was empty, and finally someone heard that we were kind of hopping from place to place, and they texted, they said, go there and walk in, you know, just walk into the house, and there was a lockbox. They sent us the code and just hunker down there and we'll figure it out later. Well, we get in there, we had 4 bags, 2 pet crates, and a dog. That's what we walked in. And that street those neighbors have all come over, introduced themselves. They've given me a list of all their phone numbers, and within a week, they furnished our house. And they furnished it, everything, and they took care of us. And our homeschool group brought all the kitchen stuff. I mean, it's shocking. And people keep saying, what do you need, what do you need? I don't know, you don't know, you can't think. You know, you're like, everything?
I've been to a couple of now these homeless events, you know, where they're looking at us that are displaced, and they give you gifts, you know. It's like I'm actually you know, well-to-do in Ventura. All these hillside people, you know, are well-to-do, you know, but you don't realize until it happens to you how much sadness there is in it. And so it's just more of a lifting up of the spirits to have somebody do those things for you. You know, some people are talking about not rebuilding in Ventura. I just don't see how you couldn't. It's wonderful living here. I mean, it's a little town community, a seaside community that everybody's still real.
I've been so warmed to see how great this community is, and I'm excited to see how we stick together as we recover and rebuild our city.
I'm grateful for the relationships that have developed as a result of this fire. The walls that have come down, the energy that has really kind of been released as a result of this fire.
The thing I am most grateful for, most appreciative of, and I knew my neighbors before this fire happened, I'd met them all, but I didn't really know my neighbors. You know, having only lived in the neighborhood about 6 months, we're still the new ones on the block. But the moment that flames were a block from our house and a neighbor came and woke us up and warned us, it was a traumatic experience, but it really did bring us all together.
And I'm very grateful that it's created this greater sense of cohesion in my whole family. It's been really nice.
Definitely just thankful for like having a place to be with family and that everyone was all right.
I would say that it was probably like the best holiday season that I can recollect.
On this whole thing, I think the biggest thing, again, that I'm thankful for is my family, which I've always known that. And when I say family, I mean my ranch family. And my kids, my 2 children, got on a plane immediately and came out here to be here to help. My son wouldn't take no for an answer, neither would my daughter. My grandson, who's only 12, but you know, bucked up and said, I've got to help. Tell me what I can do, you know, and then friends. I'm so thankful for the people that surround me.
I'm thankful I have my house. I'm thankful that all my animals survived.
I'm glad that my bed was gone because it really sucked. I'm glad I get my own bathroom now because me and my mom were sharing.
Thankful, of course, for my life. Thankful that it wasn't worse than it was. I think grateful for the opportunity to be on the other side of something so dreadful. And you know, I don't know why we were singled out to be saved, to still have a dwelling. I don't know why, but I will use that. I know that this has changed me on a very deep level, and that I will use that to be a better person and to contribute more in life.
I feel our life is absolutely better in many ways now. This is a month after the fire. The feeling that I have inside and the pace in which I'm moving at is slower. I'm more present with my kids, wife, pets, and all of my friends in my life.
I'm grateful for the absolute cleansing and purging of everything in my life so that I can recreate, have that possibility of creating what I want.
I'm really thankful for the firefighters and the police.
The firefighters who were here, who were putting out spot fires at our home in particular the day we saw our house for the first time, I thanked them. I thanked them for leaving their families and being away from their loved ones to help us. I thanked Red Cross for that. Even though things weren't perfect, I thanked Ventura County Animal Services. I thanked them all because everybody was affected by this, not just us who lost our homes.
The firefighters did a miraculous job on the house, and the house really should have gone down with the other houses, but they saved the house.
Some of the neighbors say, oh, you're the hero. I was no hero. This is what you do. This is your neighborhood. This is my neighborhood. How am I gonna feel if my house is standing and everybody else is burning around here? I mean, and so afterwards, even after, you know, we, and I say we, because there's no I in we. I mean, there was other people helping me. I just happened to be the first one that maybe seen it. The guilt trip is not being able to help everybody. My buddy Al, sitting there, He lost his house. What do you do? So, no. There's no heroes. I mean, just, hey, you helped out. I mean, everybody should do that. Wouldn't you think?
You know, the gift-giving part is really important too. But we were just incapacitated. You know, there's a mourning process that's still happening. Because, you know, you wake up and you're like, oh, I'm not in my room. Or like last night, I got up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom and I realized I don't know where I'm at. You know, this isn't my, I knew every inch of this house. And I could walk around it blindfolded and never hit into anything because it was my house. And we're in a space that's not familiar to us. And it's just a little weird. And you're wearing clothes that were given to you that aren't really you. You know, you feel a little bit like an imposter. And then there's like the shadow of what once was and then what is. And you want to grasp that. And there's nothing to grasp. And that idea of like, I can't grasp, I can't go back to that time. It's lost. It's hard. It's really hard.
All I can say is that going forward, I'm just going to be way more compassionate. You know, I've always said that apathy is a killer and that you should never be apathetic. You should always participate, you know, and help people. And now I feel it even more.
For me, I gained more than what I lost.
Is my life better? 100%.
Neighbors kept coming and friends kept coming up to help. And the biggest lesson was something my father always said was that when you pick your friends and pay attention to your friendships, because make sure they're the kind of people that you would want to go into battle with and would have your back. And another lesson was that it's some of the most unexpected people that you would never think that just showed up. I didn't even have to call.
It was heartwarming and comforting knowing that, you know, we weren't alone in this, and even if we didn't have a home to go back to, we would have everything we need for our daughter and for our family to survive as we rebuilt.
But what's important to me has changed as a result of this fire. Settling cases for millions of dollars and getting multi-million-dollar verdicts is not even on my radar anymore.
Everything just becomes more intensified and feels more important now.
At the end of the day, the thing that's most important to you or the family. I mean, all the other stuff it's gone. And if you still got each other, you got a pretty good foundation.
That's also the beauty that's come out of this.
My friends from school, they came by and gave me clothes.
We have friends that lost things, but they'll recover from that. And it almost gives you an opportunity to find out, what do you really need?
Kind of just a new perspective on what's necessary to have and what's not necessary to have and what we really truly need.
There's a quality that's here that wasn't here before the fire.
Oh, the big gift to me is that my daughter came and is healthy and happy, and we didn't have to have her on the highway because of the fire. There was a point the highways could have been closed. There were so many ways it could have happened where so many things could have gone wrong. But luckily, in our case, it was really no more than inconveniences and $400 of air filters.
I am not better off or worse off. I'm lucky that way. Maybe better off in knowing I'll be better prepared for the next one, and there will be another fire. That's a given. You live out in this area, you know it's coming. It's just a matter of when.
If I ever felt lack in life, it was just the freedom to just get up and go. You know, and feeling like, oh, wow, everything that we own owns us in a sense. And now it doesn't. It isn't.
Learning how to share on a community level is different in a disaster than it is just in a food drive. War does that to people. War did that to a couple generations. But I think this does it to us, and that we're going to fight for what we need to have in this country: goodwill, kindness, respect, appreciation of diversity, that has to flourish and come out of the ashes. It has to for the country to survive. And there's no better way than to teach that lesson than to take your home from you, to flood it, to wash it away. And when you have that level of intensity, you must rise up as a human being or check out.
And the love that people have shown us and the fact that they check on us, you know, my phone rings all the time now. People just want to say, how are you doing? You know, sometimes I want to talk and sometimes I don't, and that's okay. My neighbors still, almost every morning I get a text from somebody here. How are you today? We miss you, we love you. And that is what has risen up out of all this. And if this is what had to happen for that to rise up, I'm getting to the place where I'm like, I'm thankful then. I'm gonna be thankful. Yeah.